Fernando Verboonen, who is a pioneer of tokenization of rare cars. He will tell you about how this can be done, what is the value of this unique asset, and how you can get your exposure as well as a story of how it all started. Rey, it's a pleasure to see you here.
Hello, everyone. This is Rey Fernando. Pleasure to be here and share with you a very exciting topic, tokenization of collectible assets. I don't know if you guys get to see the the desktop. I would share with you or a little presentation. So hold on a second. All right. So we have
See your screen.
Okay. Yeah, so tokenization of assets of collectibles. We're in 2020 and there's a pandemic and global markets and um, turmoils. So the question is, what is that is out there that can protect us, or what are those safe havens? And until recently, pretty much the very wealthy would go into gold, of course, but also other collectibles, rare cars, paintings, wines, art, stamps. So these are objects, real world assets that these folks were essentially buying initially, to use one asset, and at some point they understood that some of these assets were in fact increasing in value. These are, and of course, I mean, when you look at certain cars or certain watches, what you probably notice is that some of these assets indeed appreciate more than others. So what started as a kind of a hobby in the last 10 years has seen an unprecedented professionalization, put it this way. And this is the topic I would like to share with you today on this next minutes. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CurioInvest, a platform that focuses on these collectibles. I launched this company out of a workshop at Oxford with focus on blockchain strategy. And at that course, I learned that tokenization could essentially unlock the value of certain objects which were, let's say, reserved to the very wealthy, and most importantly, which were not liquid. So when you look at these collectibles, you see watches. You probably have seen a Rolex and so on, that it was sold initially at market value, $10K, $12,000. But then you go ahead and search it online, and then you see on eBay that it costs actually $20,000. So what's happening here? There's also other types of assets, such as art. You probably heard about contemporary art or masterpieces, maybe even some auctions talking about this newfound Da Vinci and hitting record heights. So very public events, and also wine. You see some of these wines aging with time and becoming clearly more delicious, but also pricier. And you have cars, classic cars that might be found in a barn and suddenly make a splash. And there's a group of professionals that restore it, maintain it, and then they claim that the car is worth millions of dollars. So there's a research house called Knight Frank that is actually been tracking the price development of these objects. And what they identify is that, especially at that point where there is very much uncertainty in the markets, investors in general like to go for real assets. And what they saw is that, in a way, collectibles sort of resemble that hidden gem for financial assets, because not only they represent a monetary purchase. I mean, one of these cars might cost $1 million, a watch might cost $20,000, but the price of this asset changes or might appreciate over time. And what they found out is that, especially in the financial crisis in 2018, And looking at the price of these objects 10 years later, you see the development of this price, and you see it exceeding other indexes. So clearly what we see here in the last 10, 15 years is a professionalization of the space, and an object that is becoming an alternative investment and a whole new category that brings future growth for this space. So especially in the case of collectible cars, you see that their price have increased the most. In this chart, I captured the 194, so 194% appreciation. And when you look at the longer term, 2007 to 2019, you see a particular brand, Ferrari, that has increased over 340%. So there's a few folks or companies, Knight Frank, tracking this, but also traditional institutional banking institutions are aware of this. They might not yet have any, financial products, but they do engage in some sort of PR or so. There's also some interesting indexes, basically, that track the development of not only one Ferrari, but several ones. So a survey launched by UBS asking basically their clients, where do you invest your portfolio? What kind of assets do you allocate? This is where clients above $1 million, and it was a global survey, found out a very interesting statistic. So when you look at the portfolio of the wealth, you see that investors have placed their savings into equities, bonds. These are the so-called traditional ones, but also into some real estate, maybe a house or a couple of multifamily homes that provide some nice yield. And you see that these investors also invested in private equity, such as maybe in startups, 5% of their total portfolio. But collectibles, interestingly, represent 10% of the total wealth. And interestingly, when we look at what includes collectibles, you see gold, of course, but you see fine art, precious, stamps, antiques, automobiles, and wine. So this means investors or high net worth investors invest 2 times more in collectibles than in startups. So when you look at the market, you're talking about, niches, clearly. For instance, the classic car alone is roughly estimated to be $20 billion. But you're talking about a nascent alternative asset class. And these folks already invest in these cars or paintings because of the appreciation, the inflation protection, and the diversification. Of course, some of them might enjoy them, but what we learn is that a lot of them do so for these reasons. So then the clear question is, why aren't we all doing that? And the main challenge that we see across, enthusiasts in Germany, there's 50 million people who believe or who think classic cars are of interest and the alternative investment potential is access, basically. The access to these assets is extraordinarily hard. They're usually sold through very narrow networks, so you cannot, find them easily, even if you have the capital. And then, of course, some of these assets are very pricey. So a classic car might cost up to $50 million, or a painting, even more. And even when you buy the car, if let's say not so expensive, but you have it, then you have to make sure that it's maintained, stored, and and protected by experts. So this is clearly not for everyone, especially also when you need cash, it might take time to sell it. So the way we see the way this is being solved today, or opening, or the way this is changing, is through tokenization. And I'm quoting here a famous Swiss entrepreneur, and he's highlighting how tokenization is opening this asset class, real estate, luxury cars, or fine art, and making it essentially accessible for more people, for everyone. And this is clearly happening for three main reasons. I mean, on the one hand, you have the blockchain regulation, which is being, adopted and implemented in countries like Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Royal mentioned about the jurisdiction shopping. I think I agree with him. Having the right framework that protects both the investor and the founder it's definitely a must. And you have, of course, the tech development. More adoption of wallets are happening. Even qualified investors are seeking now exposure to these assets, but also the infrastructure across, institutional custody services and so on is being adopted. You also have, of course, a discussion about the pandemic and the monetary expansion. So what does it mean to bring so much capital, so much dollars across different economies? And how does that disrupt the prices of real world assets? At the end of the day, these are scarce. There are just that many of these assets. So clearly the supply of demand and demand logistics might change there. And the last is that clearly through this whole virtual setup, even today on this virtual conference, everyone is clearly adopting this idea of interacting with digital platforms, investing on them, and essentially gaining an overview to directly to such a means. Compare us to before, where you had an expert, perhaps a meeting at a bank, and then they would advise you and so on. So this phenomenon, these aspects are changing and are enabling this opportunity. So basically, the way this actually works is not so trivial. Basically, when you look at a certain asset, there needs to be a clean and simple way to link that asset into whatever is in the investor's portfolio. So in this case, the digital asset instrument or security. So the path, one of the paths that we follow here that we're very proud of, because it became the world's first tokenized car, is to set up essentially to screen a source a card. So you have a card that is ideally 10% below market value, therefore has some upside potential. Then you set up the regulatory qualification together with the regulator in order to grab this asset into an entity that has been approved and regulated by this local financial entity, and basically enables you to protect both the investors, holders of and investors on the assets, as well as the founders and the team, and basically also enabling the security to become compatible across the current standards out there. So once you grab this asset into that framework, we go ahead and basically raise the capital, and this is done through various means. We have sources, brokers that might bring some initial commitments. We have the online community who learn about us, basically chip in, and this is all captured into kind of this crowdfunding model. At that point, this event decides whether there's actually a commitment and interest from the community in this asset or not. So if there's none, clearly the funds are returned to the investors and the asset is returned to the car owner, so there's no deal. But if there is a deal, then it moves into the token issuance or security issuance setup, in which the investors get a digital asset that they can hold in their wallet that has a direct participation in the economic benefit of the underlying asset. This enables them for the first time to have a fraction or to participate in the economic exposure of Ferrari F12 TDF, of later on Picasso, and therefore build sort of a 21st century portfolio. And on your platform, through this digital platform, then you get to see this, a dashboard where you see the development and so on. So this is how an issuer, an investor, can sort of benefit from this. Now, through this regulatory qualification, you get access to this directly. And of course, when the exit comes, when there's a purchase of the asset, basically everyone we distribute the proceeds directly to the investors. So that's essentially how it develops. And I mean, in order for this to happen, you need to combine fintech and regulatory innovation. So when we look at the issuance platform, clearly we're looking at the handling of the digital assets, but what becomes more relevant going forward is how to address the specific needs for tokenization of collectibles. And interestingly, in the space of collectibles, you see that the tokenization becomes rather a second topic, but the sourcing of this, it becomes more relevant. So the idea here is that in a way, the community engages or participates in the sourcing of these assets. And the reason is why, finding these assets is not trivial. And of course, having devoted community members globally located would bring this into a new level. So this is an example of an asset that our team just successfully tokenized. The car is, as you can tell, is not an old one. It's not a classic one. It's a rather new one, 2015. However, it's a limited edition one. So there were 799 vehicles of this one specifically, and basically, it was sold at an auction in 2016-15 for $1.5 million. So you're looking at a car that was sold by Ferrari for $500,000, then brought to an auction for $1.5 million, and we managed to source it for 1.1. So the token itself, we believe of this as the next generations of tokens that in a way represent real assets. It has the legal backup of this prospectus. It has the compatibility with the traditional world, the so-called IC number, but it can be split, by $1, and this is quite impressive. So basically, in the future, this token is exchange ready, so we can list it at an exchange, and anyone in the world can buy a Ferrari F12 TDF for $1. And this alone enables all sort of innovation and products to pop up. And of course, this first one, was featured everywhere. But we're very excited to see more assets coming, and you see here the pipeline of, other collectibles, even classic cars, but also very exotic ones. And this is the very, very exciting field. And of course, when the way we're collaborating with this kind of with the current ecosystem today is that a single entity cannot solve cannot unlock the whole value of art. So we're building this kind of ecosystem with private banks, with exchanges, and with different providers, service providers, in order to enable a compliant distribution. And basically, what we see today is really three steps. So the first step is genuinely to deal with qualified clients. They no longer need to put very big amounts. They can start with $100,000, and here we provide them a proper investment report about certain assets on a frequent basis, and this report provides some guidance, some intelligence, some research findings and insights, as well as investment implications in the whole ecosystem. And basically, they decide whether to participate in a single asset or in the pipeline of net assets, but by discussing directly with our team. And then in the second step, we see, of course, retail as the key winner in this. We have millions of Germans, and there's an auto Geneva salon with millions of attendants, enthusiasts who see the assets of these
Right.
these assets appreciate, and therefore, yeah.
I am to interrupt you. Your speech is fantastic, and I am sure you can talk about tokenization of cars for another 5 hours. We have the next panel starting like right now.
All right.
So I thank you very much for your speech. Bye.
Bye.
So many things to discuss here. I also wanted to ask a question about NFTs as collectible. We have a Best Media Award on this conference in the form of NFT. So like very interesting discussion. I hope you can jump in someday. And now I'm ready to introduce our next panel.